Today on the Mothers of All Crime, we're going to be taking a bite out of crime. We're going to talk a little bit about some current events, some things that caught our eye, some things that felt relevant. And yeah, so that's what we're going to basically be doing with this new segment.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. I think there's a lot of news stories that are female related that get lost in the shuffle, particularly lately in this crazy world we're living in. So each time something we find interesting pops up, we're going to share it with you guys.
Yeah, I am excited to do that because I feel like there's always at least one thing going on every single week that I want to talk about. And it seems like I'm in like a small minority of people maybe that care about it, but maybe that's just the people that I happen to be interacting with during the day. The internet's a whole big world.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a lot of the time, if you don't have the right, I want to say filters, I guess, coming up on your news streams, you're not going to get all of the stories because depending on what you listen to or what channels or podcasts or whatever the case is, it's just a wide variety of information. So there's a lot
That's
out there.
definitely true. Our algorithms are so curated to what we're already interested in that it's you have to kind of step outside yourself. And I think listening to podcasts is one of the ways that I do that. And hopefully our listeners do too, where I learn about topics that I'm maybe not already an expert in. I listen to a lot of different things on podcasts.
Yep. Podcasts and TikTok, I swear, my algorithms read my mind sometimes. So,
Although I will say, I feel like after TikTok was banned temporarily and it came back, my algorithm was pretty messed up. And I'm
oh
still,
no.
brick by brick trying to repair it. It was like a little bit off. I'm like, what has happened?
Our
That was a
3
dark
hours
24
of
hours.
downtown.
It was a little bit more than 3 hours. It was bleak. For some
Those
of
are
us, it
rough,
was hard.
dark times, dark times.
It was almost a day. It was hard.
So do you have a specific topic that you found that you want to talk about for this episode?
I do. So I was shocked and horrified to see a story that's an international story about that took place in the country of Georgia. It was related to human trafficking. There were three women that were speaking out because they had recently been rescued from essentially being held hostage in a house in Georgia and being used as human egg like manufacturers. They were treated like cattle. It is the
Oh,
craziest thing.
I'm glad you said the country of Georgia because my first brain instinct was going to say it probably was Savannah, New Report. And that's very incorrect.
Very different place for sure. But I think that, yeah, I think a lot of people, when they first are seeing that story, at least if you live in the USA, are centering it on the state of Georgia. But this is
Yeah.
certainly not the state of Georgia. This is the country of Georgia. So basically, what happened is allegedly a Chinese gang was posting on Facebook advertising for surrogates to come to Georgia. And they were paying pretty well and they attracted a lot of people. And the thing that I wanted to mention with that is Thailand has a lot of restrictions on surrogacy that are not true in Georgia or a lot of other places. And I think those restrictions have in some ways led to this situation even being possible. Um,
Mm.
because if it was legal, you wouldn't need to go outside of your country to do it. So that's a whole big issue, I suppose. And there really aren't international human rights laws or surrogacy laws that address this at all. It's kind of like a free for all, especially if you're doing things between multiple countries. It's very hard to regulate. So I think that that in itself is a big issue that needs to be addressed as the technology advances. But I mean, apparently about 100 women were being held against their will and being used as just, producers of eggs and being given hormones.
That's so creepy. I think you're right when it comes to the communication, that it's very easy to get lost in the communication sides of it when it comes to illegal things. Cuz take from internal country-wise, the United States. The states have a really hard time communicating with each other about criminal histories, arrest reports, joint task force. That it's hard. Think about the adoption conversations we've had in the past,
Mhm.
where you just you do one thing, you start to get in trouble and you leave. So I can only imagine how much more difficult it would be to follow an international gang and tracing people. Not to mention, I don't think people understand how much human trafficking happens and how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are involved, that they tend to victimize these people who are very low income. They're just trying to survive. So, an advertisement like this for surrogacy, what an easy way to make some money if you're fighting to feed yourself and your children, and you have a daughter who's single and not married and she's considered like an old maid. What a great way for her to like make an income to help support the family. So I could see how it would be appealing to people.
Yeah, I think that surrogacy and human trafficking are conversations that you can have definitely together and separate, but they matter in this case for each other. And the reason that these women were so susceptible to it is because they did not have an option to profit from surrogacy in Thailand. You can only do it altruistically in Thailand. There's a lot of restrictions too on the people who are qualified to get a surrogate, which you have to be a heterosexual married couple and you absolutely cannot pay your surrogate. You usually have to be related to your surrogate. So
Which is
if
wild to think about. Like, just, "Hi,
yeah,
Susie, Aunt Susie, could you please carry my baby for free?" Like, that's crazy.
for sure. And I mean, but there are a lot of places that that is the rule and I could understand it, but the problem is when one rule is this way here but not that way there is it opens up the opportunity for you to go somewhere else and either make money off of it or still be able to do it. It's kind of like the polygamy laws that we have here, kind of like the drug laws that we have here, where the interstate differences create wiggle room for crimes to happen.
I wonder how they, like, pulled this off after the fact. Did it say anything about, like, obviously, they're pumping them with hormones to
Mhm.
increase their egg production, all that, but then what? Like, would they how
So
I
they
guess
were
some of the
selling
like, how do you deal with that afterwards?
there's a black market for human eggs. And that's people who are not either can't afford to or aren't going to meet whatever qualifications to get donor eggs because a lot of places have laws. Like this is something that's done back alley. This is very black market.
Turkey baster 101, I
Not
guess.
turkey baster. It has to be IVF.
So
Has to be
there's,
IVF.
like, seriously educated people involved in this. So
Yeah,
that makes me feel there has to be such a high ticket on these if you have doctors
definitely.
willing to, like, licensed professionals willing to kind of skirt around everything.
Right.
They gotta be making bank. Not that it makes it
I would
okay, but
I would think so because they could have held them and used them as surrogates and they didn't because you can only have like one baby a year if you're a surrogate. But if you're
right.
put on a bunch of hormones and forced to create all of these eggs against your will, like that can turn into potentially a lot more children.
That's a good point. And I wonder, because it was a gang, if there was, in human trafficking in general, like if there was a group that they were doing the eggs with, and then a group that they were doing surrogacy with and selling the rest of them. Like, I bet there's a lot more of an underground connection that they haven't put together. At least that would be my speculation, particularly if a gang's the one that's running it.
That's what the articles I've been seeing. It says that it's a gang run out of China, but I don't know if that's 100% true. The women that are speaking out that were rescued from the situation are, I mean, everything's being done to protect their identities. They've only given interviews like with hoodies on, with masks on. So I don't know if specific individuals have been named as suspects or if this is just more of a group project, if you will. But there had to be a lot of players involved to actually keep all of these people in the house.
Right. Yeah. And I think what my other question would be is like who would be responsible for prosecuting this too? Is
True.
Georgia like the country that goes after because it happened in their country? Is it Thailand because or China because that's where the people originated from? Is it the UN and having like a global perspective? I don't know who would be responsible with so many players involved. I would think Georgia.
I would also think Georgia. I think that Thailand probably should be pushing for charges, but if I'm not really sure this it seems like something the UN would have to do because it does involve all of these different countries with their different laws. And yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. And I guess probably as information comes out about it, because this was relatively fresh in the beginning of the year, kind of coming
Mhm.
out, I'm sure investigations in multiple jurisdictions would be opened. I know from like recent research that I've done outside of this, the UN doesn't really like to get involved if they don't have to, because I think it just makes everybody upset that this overarching entity is coming in to tell you how to run your country. But I feel like if this is the one that got found, you know that there's more to it. And you know there's probably more houses they just haven't found yet, which is really sad. But also good that the hat got taken off at least.
Absolutely, but I mean, it only came to the attention of the media after 3 of the hostages were freed, and that involved a family member coming up with 70,000 baht, which is the Thai dollar, in ransom to get her out. So they must have been able to get some sort of communication with their families at home, and if that hadn't happened, I'm not sure how else it would be caught. And the thing with the eggs, the other thing I want to think about with the eggs is they have to be kept at certain temperatures and they have to be preserved in certain ways. So I would imagine getting these across country lines, especially through airports, would be quite difficult. And I wonder if maybe there's an operation within Georgia where it's going to fertility clinics there and it's not actually leaving.
That I feel like makes the most sense. I'm sure if they can figure out how to export it, they would, but why? And coming from someone who has zero knowledge about like the shelf life of that, I can't imagine that eggs are like viable for a long period of time after they've been taken out of your body. You would think that they'd have to like, right? Like you take them out,
Yeah.
they have to be inseminated within a certain period of time or they aren't good.
So they could be frozen indefinitely, but you'd have to have nitrogen to keep them at the right temperature. And they're usually in those in gigantic metal containers. Like it would not
Yeah.
be cheap or subtle or easy to get those through airport security of any kind.
Or transporting, like you would need a serious amount of power in a vehicle of some sort, like a truck or something, to
Hmm.
get it somewhere.
Well, if they were just driving across country lines, I guess they could just stack up a bunch of the canisters in the truck and drive away with it. It's possible. It's a
Yeah, I don't
landlocked
know.
country, so it's possible.
True. I feel like that I don't know, because gangs are so much smarter than people to give them credit for, at least the high ranking guys, because they're the ones that never get caught. They're the ones orchestrating everything. So I'm sure there's a pretty decent plan there. And it's the bottom level grunts, really, that take the fall all the time because, I don't know, stupid criminals get caught.
Yeah. I mean, this is definitely extremely organized crime.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I feel like I had only seen one article on this maybe a month ago, not even. And it's crazy to me that it's not talked about. Like, how is this not something that people are talking about, considering the world and women's opinion movements and things like that that are happening? The fact that this isn't more publicized is astonishing.
I agree with that. Definitely. I think that it's an atrocity and it, I don't know. It's so morally wrong. It's so terrible, and to think that people will not really be held accountable and that there's people probably being held still right now as hostages in these egg farms, which is so disgusting. It's like, women aren't even considered people, I guess, sometimes, which is sickening.
Yeah. And I know there are processes that women can donate eggs and get paid for them legally
Yeah.
in a lot of senses. And I think it's an amazing thing if you're voluntarily making those decisions and giving someone who can't the opportunity. I think that's awesome. But I think the problem here is these women were tricked into something and then held against their will. And I don't know, there's some part of me that just thinks that if they were aware that they could do it legally other places, maybe they would have done it. But they thought this was the way to do it because of just lack of education, lack of knowledge, lack of opportunity. It's
Well,
sad.
it was totally a bait and switch because they're told they're going to be surrogates, which there are different types of surrogates, but the most common now is that someone is just a gestational carrier and they carry a baby that they're not actually biologically related to, and it's done through IVF. So if you thought that's what you were signing up for, that's extremely different than having your own eggs taken, because now the resulting children from those eggs are your biological children. But
Oh,
those women are not
true.
going to know where the eggs are, what happened to them, and they did not voluntarily give them up.
Right. Talk
So
about
it makes it even more human
trauma.
trafficking. Yeah. I mean, yeah, because it's human trafficking of the women, but it's also human trafficking of their children, their
Oh,
potential
yeah,
children.
that's true. Because I guess too, you have the idea of like once you're out, hypothetically, for these women that were rescued, now is the question of, do I have a child out there? Like, what happened to all my, like, and then what if they
For
can't
sure.
have their own children later on because of all of the like hormones pumping in? Like, I can't imagine having to process that if that happens. That's awful.
Well, for sure. And we don't know if anybody was damaged by the hormones, medications, how well they were actually monitored. I'm sure it was not being done in a regulated, safe way, because
Right.
this is already an illegal operation. So if they're doing back to back extractions after month, pumping themselves up with all these hormones, I mean, some women can produce 30, 40 eggs. So you could have hundreds of children
Right.
potentially. But
And
also, are these eggs being used for that? Are they being used for science experiment? Like, I would assume that they are, because that would give them the most value. But I don't
well,
know.
I can't imagine all of them would be viable either, considering, like
Oh,
you said,
definitely
if you're
not.
being pumped with all this stuff and you're not doing it in a correct way, I can't imagine that's going to work well, viability
Well,
wise, let alone execution. Like,
so we don't know what happened obviously afterwards, but it's certainly not going to be one egg equals one child. It's the ratio is way worse than that. But the thing is, you wouldn't know. I bet they weren't even telling them how many eggs they got, what they did with them. So
yeah.
they have no clue.
Now flip it though. If you're the person buying these eggs, expecting them all to be viable too, and my guess, just by the way that they're probably doing it, considering it's backdoor, most of them probably aren't. Now you're spending this crazy money because it's a higher ticket because it's illegal, and you don't even get a viable product. So they're making bank off this for just abusing and torturing women and the vulnerable who want the eggs as well.
Sure. But I also think, why are you buying the eggs illegally? I guess maybe they're selling them to places where egg donation is not legal,
Right.
which again, It's just like, outlawing marijuana, outlawing alcohol, things like that. It doesn't actually stop those things from happening because
Oh,
people who
yeah.
have money will always still find solutions. Banning abortion, anything. People with money are still going to go and get the things done. It's just
Or
harder for the
even
poor people.
if it's not even like money, I feel like, because if you're like a gay couple, for example, and it's illegal for you to
Mm,
do it like legally and you want to have a child, they're going to figure out a way to do it. Some people will drain their entire life savings, every penny that they have to do this because that's what they want.
for sure.
And like, if you don't, what do you do if you have no other option? I think it's just if someone
Well,
wants something bad
that's
enough, they'll figure out how to do it.
yeah, and that's what caused bootlegging in the prohibition era. It's the reaction to this
Right.
is illegal, but everyone still wants it, everyone's still going to do it. You can't actually put barriers that are really going to stop everyone. And I just meant with the money that like money helps you jump over barriers.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it definitely helps.
Like if you need to fly to Georgia to get eggs, if you need to pay a surrogate $100,000 here, if it depends. But if you have money, it's just less of an issue.
Right. And I feel like when it comes to certain parts of the world, and I'm not educated enough about Georgia to like say Georgia, but there's a lot of countries that there is a lot of corruption and financial
Mhm.
corruption where if you know the right people and you slide a little bit of money, they'll look the other way regardless. So there's probably that factor as well, hypothetically.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. It's a sad
Ugh,
one.
that's an awful one. Well,
I
I'm
know.
glad you brought this one. I liked the recognition of it. I think it's important considering it's not out as much. So I'm glad you picked this one for this week.
Thank you. Thank you. Someone really wise suggested it to me. Um, I feel like it's topical. It's about women. It's about motherhood, but it's not, and it's definitely about crimes. But the
Yeah,
women are the victims in this situation, and I think it's important to talk about exploitation when you can.
absolutely. And very unique, a very unique story that I've
Ugh,
never
I
heard
hope
anything
so.
like it, at
I
least
hope
not
so.
to date.
It makes me wonder how much this happens.
Oh, I think it's definitely getting the public's starting to be more aware of what's going on in the underbelly of the world, and this is a good example.
Mm, hmm Well, I think that's what I had for that. Final thoughts?
Well, I, I'm kind of at a loss for words. It's just a crazy one that feels like it should be on like Law and Order SVU and not real, but it is.
Yeah. Well, they steal everything from the headlines anyway for that show.
That is true. All right. Well, thank you for this topic. Do you have final thoughts?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, on to our next one and look forward to talking to you next one.
Absolutely.